On my 58th birthday, my son Kieran looked me straight in the eye and said the words that would haunt him forever. "Dad, I wish you would just disappear and leave me alone." I smiled, packed a single bag, and walked out the door. Within 3 hours, he was calling everyone he knew, begging them to help him find me. You won't believe what happened next that changed our relationship forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The morning of March 15th started like any other birthday in the Castellano household. I woke up early, made my usual black coffee, and sat at the kitchen table of our Denver townhouse, watching the sunrise paint the Rocky Mountains in shades of gold. At 58, I'd learned to appreciate these quiet moments before the day demanded my attention. The insurance adjusting business had been good to me over the past 30 years. Good enough to buy this place in Cherry Hills, good enough to put Kieran through Colorado State without student loans, good enough to keep him comfortable while he figured out his path for the past 4 years since graduation. I'd planned a simple celebration, nothing fancy, just dinner at Romano's Italian Bistro where we'd been going since Kieran was 12. The same corner booth where we used to discuss his baseball games and college applications back when he still looked at me with respect instead of the barely concealed irritation that had become our new normal. Kieran emerged from his room around noon, hair disheveled, wearing the same University of Colorado sweatshirt he'd been living in for weeks. He moved through the kitchen like I wasn't there, grabbing an energy drink from the refrigerator with the practiced efficiency of someone avoiding conversation. "Happy birthday to me, I guess," I said, attempting the light-hearted tone that used to earn me at least a chuckle. He paused, one hand on the refrigerator handle, and turned to face me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not just annoyance or teenage attitude, but something colder, more calculated. "You know what, Dad?" His voice carried a weight that made me set down my coffee cup. "I'm tired of pretending everything is fine. I'm tired of forced dinners and fake conversations. Honestly, the best birthday gift you could give yourself would be to just disappear and leave me alone." The words landed like physical blows. 26 years of fatherhood, midnight feedings, little league practices, college visits, job interviews I'd helped him prepare for, all reduced to a wish for my absence. For the past 4 years since Kieran graduated with his communications degree, I'd been telling myself that his attitude was temporary, just a young man finding his way in a tough job market. I'd supported him through 3 different career explorations, a stint at a marketing agency that lasted 2 months, a brief attempt at freelance writing that produced exactly 1 paid article, and most recently, his declaration that he was building his personal brand through social media. I'd converted the basement into a comfortable living space for him, complete with a kitchenette and separate entrance. The rent I could have charged would have covered my property taxes, but I'd convinced myself that family came first. Every month, I transferred $1,200 into his checking account, enough to cover his car payment, insurance, phone bill, and spending money. "You're enabling him, Vincent," my sister Elena had warned me during our last phone call. "At 26, he should be contributing to the household, not treating you like an ATM." But I'd defended him. Kieran was different from other kids, creative, thoughtful, just needed time to find his passion. The economy was tough for young people. He was my only child since his mother passed away 8 years ago from cancer. I'd promised Maria on her deathbed that I'd take care of him. Looking at him now, energy drink in hand, staring at me with undisguised resentment, I wondered when taking care of him had transformed into being treated like an inconvenience in my own home. "Kieran, I know things have been tense lately, but..." "Tense?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dad, you hover constantly. You ask about my plans, my applications, my progress on projects that frankly aren't any of your business. I'm not 12 anymore." I thought about the job fair flyers I'd left on his desk last week, the gentle reminders about networking events in Denver's tech corridor, the conversations about maybe taking some additional courses to strengthen his resume. Had I been hovering, or had I been trying to help? "I just want what's best for you," I said quietly. "What's best for me is space to figure out my own life without constant judgment from someone who settled for a boring insurance job and thinks everyone should follow the same safe path." The words cut deeper than I expected. Boring, settled. safe. Was that really how he saw the career that had provided everything he'd ever needed? I should have walked away then. Should have let the conversation end and pretended his words didn't matter. But something compelled me to stay in the kitchen doorway, listening to what happened next. Kieran's phone buzzed and he answered without looking at the caller ID. "Hey, Zach, what's up?" I pretended to organize papers at the kitchen counter, but every word of his conversation carried clearly through our open-concept living space. "Yeah, the old man's being weird again about his birthday," Kieran said, his voice taking on the casual dismissiveness I'd heard him use with delivery drivers and customer service representatives. "Wants to do the whole father-son bonding dinner thing. It's exhausting, man." My hands stilled on the insurance claims I'd been sorting. "Honestly, I wish he'd just back off and let me live my life," Kieran continued, walking toward the living room. "He acts like paying my bills gives him the right to manage every aspect of my existence. Like, I get it. You're my dad, but I didn't ask to be born, you know." The paper in my hands crumpled slightly. I'd heard that argument before from other young adults, but hearing it from my own son felt like discovering a stranger had been living in my house. "The worst part is how he makes everything about responsibility and planning for the future." Kieran's voice grew more animated, feeding off what I assumed was Zach's agreement on the other end. "Meanwhile, he's been doing the same boring job for 30 years, zero ambition, zero creativity, and he wonders why I don't take his advice seriously." I moved closer to the archway between the kitchen and living room, staying out of sight but needing to hear more. "I swear, Zach, sometimes I fantasize about him just disappearing so I could have some peace. Not dying or anything dramatic. Just like moving to Florida with other retired people and leaving me alone to figure out my own path without constant interference." The fantasy he'd just described to his friend wasn't angry or heat of the moment. It was detailed, considered, something he'd apparently thought about extensively. This wasn't a birthday mood swing. This was how my son actually felt about my presence in his life. "Yeah, exactly. And the guilt trips when I don't want to do family dinner every week, or when I don't update him on every job application. It's like he thinks being my father means owning me forever." I backed away from the archway, my heart pounding with a mixture of hurt and something approaching clarity. 26 years of being needed, of being the solution to problems, of being dad. And I'd become the problem instead. When Kieran finished his phone call, I was waiting in the living room, not hiding anymore, not pretending I hadn't heard every word he'd said to Zach about his fantasy of my disappearance. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. He looked up from his phone with the expression of someone interrupted during important business. "Dad, I told you I don't want to do the birthday dinner thing today. Can't we just skip it this year?" "This isn't about dinner." I sat down across from him, noting how he immediately tensed. "I overheard your conversation with Zach." The color drained from his face, but only for a moment. Then something shifted. Instead of embarrassment or apology, I saw defiance. "So you were eavesdropping on my private conversation?" "In my own house, Kieran. The house where you live rent-free with bills I pay, eating food I buy." My voice remained calm, but each word carried weight I'd never used with him before. "And in that private conversation, you called me boring, said I had zero ambition, and fantasized about me disappearing from your life." "Dad? Were you lying to Zach? Or were you lying to me all these years when you said you appreciated my support?" He set his phone down and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not the sheepish guilt of a child caught misbehaving, but the cold assessment of an adult who'd been cornered and decided to fight back. "Fine. You want honesty?" "Yes, I meant what I said to Zach." His voice grew stronger with each word. "You are boring, Dad. You've done the same job in the same office for 30 years. You drive the same route to the same grocery store every Saturday. You watch the same TV shows and read the same type of books and never ever do anything unexpected." The clinical precision of his assessment was more devastating than any emotional outburst could have been. "And yes, you hover. You make suggestions about my career like you have any idea what the modern job market looks like. You leave job fair flyers on my desk like I'm still in college. You ask about my progress on projects like you're my manager instead of my father. I've been trying to help you succeed. No, you've been trying to make me into a smaller version of yourself. Kieran stood up, towering over me in a way that felt deliberately intimidating. And I don't want your version of success. I don't want your safe, predictable, boring life where the biggest adventure is choosing a different restaurant for birthday dinner. The conversation had crossed a line we'd never approached before. This wasn't a disagreement about chores or curfews. This was my son rejecting everything I'd built, everything I'd tried to teach him, everything I represented. I sat there for a moment, absorbing the full impact of what Kieran had just said. 30 years of building a career that provided stability and security for my family, reduced to boring. 8 years of single parenthood after Maria's death, trying to be both mother and father, dismissed as hovering. 4 years of financial support while he found himself, characterized as controlling interference. You think my life is boring, I said slowly, but that boring life has funded your freedom to explore creative careers and build personal brands and figure out your path without the pressure of paying rent or buying groceries. I never asked for any of that. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. It was the same argument I'd heard from the phone conversation, but delivered directly to my face with even more conviction. You never asked for college tuition? You never asked for a car, insurance, spending money, a place to live? My voice remained controlled, but something fundamental was shifting inside me. You never asked for any support while you took 2 months to decide the marketing job wasn't creative enough, or while you spent 6 months writing one freelance article? That's what parents do, Dad. They support their kids until the kids can support themselves. You're 26, Kieran. When exactly does that transition happen? He crossed his arms, and I saw Maria's stubborn streak in the set of his jaw. But where Maria's determination had been directed toward building something positive, Kieran's seemed focused entirely on avoiding responsibility. When I find the right opportunity, when I figure out what I actually want to do instead of what you think I should do. I stood up slowly, feeling something cold and analytical take over from the hurt and confusion. This was the same mental shift I'd experienced during Maria's illness, the moment when emotion had to step aside for practical decision-making. What if I told you I was tired, Kieran? What if I said I was exhausted from trying to help someone who sees my help as interference, my guidance as control, and my presence as an obstacle to his happiness? Then maybe you should take a break from trying to fix me. The words were delivered with casual cruelty, as if he'd been waiting for permission to say them. I looked around the living room, at the furniture I'd chosen, the mortgage I'd been paying for 8 years, the utilities and insurance and property taxes that came out of my checking account every month. Then I looked at my son, standing in the middle of it all, wishing I would disappear. You know what? You're absolutely right. I headed toward the stairs, feeling calmer than I had in months. I think a break is exactly what we both need. Dad, where are you going? For the first time in our conversation, uncertainty crept into his voice. But I was already climbing the stairs, each step taking me toward a decision I should have made years ago. My bedroom had been a sanctuary since Maria's death, the place where I'd processed grief, made difficult decisions, and planned for a future that kept changing faster than I could adapt. Now, it would be the place where I made the most important decision of my relationship with my son. I pulled my old Navy duffel bag from the closet and began packing with the same methodical precision I'd learned in the military 28 years ago. 3 changes of clothes, toiletries, medications, important documents, and the emergency cash I'd always kept in the bedroom safe. $2,000 that Maria had insisted we maintain for unexpected situations. This definitely qualified as unexpected. Kieran appeared in the doorway as I was folding my last shirt. Dad, what are you doing? Exactly what you asked for. I didn't look up from the duffel bag. I'm giving you the space you need to figure out your own path without interference from your boring, hovering father. That's not what I meant. You said you fantasized about me disappearing so you could have peace. You said you wanted me to take a break from trying to fix you. I zipped the bag and turned to face him. I'm granting both requests. His expression shifted from confusion to something approaching panic. You can't just leave. This is your house. Yes, it is. which means I can make decisions about where I spend my time and who I support financially. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder. You wanted independence, Kieran. Time to find out what that actually looks like. Where are you going? Does it matter? You said you wanted me gone. I walked past him toward the stairs, noting how he stepped aside without meeting my eyes. In the kitchen, I wrote a quick note on the pad we used for grocery lists. Kieran, you have what you wanted. The house is yours for now. Bills are paid through the end of the month. After that, you'll need to figure out your own arrangements. The independence you've been seeking starts today. Dad. I left the note on the kitchen counter next to his energy drink and headed for the front door. Dad, wait! Kieran's voice followed me, higher pitched than I'd heard it in years. You can't just walk out on your birthday. This is crazy. I paused with my hand on the door handle. What's crazy is a 26-year-old man living rent-free in his father's house while complaining that his father is ruining his life. What's crazy is me enabling that situation for 4 years. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. I opened the door, feeling Colorado's crisp March air against my face, and now you get exactly what you said you wanted. The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded like the end of one chapter and the beginning of something entirely unknown. I drove to the Hampton Inn on Colorado Boulevard, the same hotel where I'd stayed during Kieran's college orientation when the dorms weren't ready yet. The familiar lobby felt surreal, returning to a place associated with hopeful beginnings while making a decision that felt like an ending. How many nights? The desk clerk asked, her name tag reading Jessica. I'm not sure yet. Let's start with a week and see how things go. Room 237 overlooked the parking lot where my Ford Explorer sat alone under a streetlight. I'd driven the same vehicle for 6 years, another example of the predictable choices Kieran found so boring, but it was reliable, paid off, and currently contained everything I owned that mattered. I sat on the hotel bed and turned off my phone. Not because I was angry, but because I needed time to think without the distraction of messages or calls. Kieran would probably try to reach me soon, and I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. The silence was remarkable. For 4 years, I'd lived with the constant low-level tension of wondering what mood Kieran would be in, whether he'd need money for gas or groceries, if he'd found a job lead or abandoned another project. The weight of his disappointment and my worry had become so familiar I'd forgotten what peace felt like. Now, sitting in a generic hotel room with nothing but my thoughts, I realized how exhausted I'd become. Maria would have handled this differently. She'd always been better at setting boundaries with Kieran, even when he was young. Love doesn't mean enabling, she'd said when he was 16 and wanted to quit his part-time job because it interfered with his social life. She'd made him keep the job, and he'd thanked her later for teaching him work ethic. I'd tried to honor her memory by being extra supportive after she died, compensating for his loss by being both parents. But somewhere along the way, support had become enabling, and enabling had become a trap that neither of us knew how to escape. My phone, despite being turned off, seemed to pulse with potential energy. I knew that back in Cherry Hills, Kieran was probably discovering what it felt like to be alone in a house he'd taken for granted, facing the reality that independence meant more than just freedom from parental guidance. The note I'd left mentioned bills paid through the end of the month. 2 weeks from now, he'd receive his first utility bill, his first property tax notice, his first insurance premium. The monthly transfer of $1,200 into his account would stop, the refrigerator would empty, and no one would refill it. For the first time since Maria's death, I was choosing my own well-being over Kieran's comfort. The decision should have felt selfish, but instead, it felt like the most loving thing I'd done for either of us in years. I turned my phone back on the next morning and found 17 missed calls from Kieran, 12 text messages, and 3 voicemails. The progression told a story: confusion, then anger, then something approaching desperation. The texts ranged from dismissive, "This is ridiculous, Dad," to demanding, "Where are you? Call me back immediately," to worried, "Dad, please just let me know you're okay." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called my office and requested a week of vacation time. As a senior insurance adjuster with 30 years of accumulated leave, taking time off wasn't complicated. I'd earned the flexibility through decades of reliability. Then I called Elena, my sister in Phoenix. "Vincent, how was your birthday dinner with Kieran?" That's actually why I'm calling. I gave her the abbreviated version of our confrontation and my decision to leave. I'm at a hotel, giving us both some space to think. It's about time. Elena had never been one to soften her opinions. I've been waiting for you to stop enabling him since Maria died. She would have put a stop to this nonsense years ago. Maybe, but I thought I was being supportive. There's a difference between support and subsidizing someone's refusal to grow up. Elena's voice carried the authority of someone who'd raised 3 successful children. How long are you planning to stay away? I don't know yet, until he figures out that independence requires more than just wishing his father would disappear. Good. And Vincent, don't cave when he starts crying and promising to change. You've heard those promises before. She was right. I'd heard them after the marketing job ended, after the freelance writing experiment failed, after every conversation about job applications and career planning. Kieran was excellent at temporary contrition, followed by a gradual return to the same patterns. I spent the afternoon at the Denver Botanic Gardens, walking through exhibits I'd never had time to visit during my busy working years. The conservatory was particularly peaceful, a controlled environment where different plants thrived according to their specific needs, with careful attention to what each species required for healthy growth. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. I'd been trying to nurture Kieran in the wrong environment for his development. Comfort and financial security weren't helping him grow. They were preventing the kind of challenges that create resilience and self-reliance. That evening, I allowed myself to read his messages, but still didn't respond. The tone had shifted throughout the day from anger to genuine worry, but the underlying assumption remained the same, that I would eventually come home and resume our previous arrangement. By the 3rd day, his messages had become less frequent, but more revealing. He'd apparently tried to figure out some basic household tasks and discovered that running a home involved more complexity than he'd realized. References to the weird noise the furnace is making and why is the internet so slow suggested he was encountering the kinds of maintenance issues I'd been handling invisibly for years. I continued my strategic silence, using the time to clarify my own thinking about what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted to have with my son moving forward. On the 4th day, I made the call I'd been considering since I checked into the hotel. My brother-in-law, Marcus, had been offering me a position with his construction consulting firm in Tucson for 2 years. The work would involve traveling to different job sites, evaluating insurance claims, and training local adjusters. Exactly the kind of change from routine that I'd never allowed myself to consider while maintaining stability for Kieran. Vincent, I was hoping you'd finally take me up on the offer, Marcus said when I explained my situation. The position is still open, and honestly, your experience with residential claims is exactly what we need for the Arizona market expansion. When would you need an answer? How about yesterday? But seriously, we could have you started within 2 weeks if you're interested. The salary is competitive, and we'd handle relocation expenses. For 30 years, I'd made every major decision with Kieran's stability in mind. College choices, job opportunities, even dating after Maria's death. Everything filtered through the question of how it would affect my son's well-being. This was the first time I was considering my own future independently. Send me the details, I told Marcus. I'm very interested. That evening, I finally responded to one of Kieran's messages, not with explanations or negotiations, but with a simple statement. I'm safe. Still taking the time I need. The house is yours to figure out. His response came within minutes. Dad, please come home. We can work this out. I was wrong about some things. Some things. Not everything. Not the fundamental disrespect and entitlement, just some things. The partial acknowledgement confirmed that he still didn't understand the scope of the problem. I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the evening researching apartments in Tucson, looking at photos of places where I could start fresh without the constant reminder of years spent enabling behavior I'd mistaken for supporting dreams. The next morning brought a different type of message from Kieran. Dad, I tried to pay the electric bill online, but your password doesn't work anymore. And I can't figure out how to contact the heating repair company about the furnace noise. Can you help? The practical realities of independent living were beginning to intersect with his abstract desire for freedom from parental involvement. Managing a household required more than just occupying space. It demanded the kind of adult responsibilities he'd been avoiding through 4 years of subsidized exploration. I forwarded Marcus's job offer details to my personal email and began drafting a resignation letter to my current employer. 30 years of reliable service had earned me the right to leave on good terms with proper notice. For the first time since Maria's death, I was making decisions based on my own preferences rather than Kieran's needs. The sensation was both liberating and terrifying, like learning to use muscles that had been dormant for years. On day 6 of my hotel stay, my phone rang at 2:47 a.m. Kieran's name on the caller ID made my heart race. Emergency calls at that hour usually meant serious problems. "Dad?" His voice was smaller than I'd heard it since childhood. "I'm sorry to call so late, but the furnace stopped working completely, and it's 38 degrees in the house. I don't know who to call or what to do." I sat up in the hotel bed, my parental instincts warring with my resolve to let him handle his own problems. "Did you check if the pilot light went out?" "I don't know where the pilot light is. I don't know anything about furnaces." The admission came with a vulnerability I hadn't heard from him in years. "Dad, I tried to fix it myself, but I think I made it worse. There's a smell now, like gas. Kieran, if you smell gas, you need to leave the house immediately and call the gas company emergency line." My voice sharpened with genuine alarm. "Don't turn on any lights or electrical switches, just get out." "The emergency line? I don't have that number. Dad, can you please come home? I'm scared and I don't know who else to call." The word "scared" hit me harder than any of his angry messages or dismissive comments. This wasn't manipulation or emotional blackmail. This was a young man confronting the gap between his assumptions about independence and the reality of managing adult responsibilities. "I'm not coming home tonight, Kieran, but I'll walk you through this step by step." I spent the next 20 minutes on the phone with him, helping him locate the gas shutoff valve, find the emergency contact information, and arrange for temporary heating while he waited for repairs. "Dad," he said when the immediate crisis was resolved, "I've been thinking about what I said on your birthday, about wanting you to disappear and leave me alone. And I was wrong. Not just wrong about the things I said, but wrong about everything. I thought independence meant not having to answer to anyone or consider anyone else's feelings. But it's not that at all, is it?" I waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. Independence means being capable of handling your own problems, making your own decisions, supporting yourself financially and emotionally. It means being someone other people can depend on instead of constantly depending on other people. The insight was more mature than any conversation we'd had in years. The last 6 days I've been trying to figure out basic things like grocery shopping with a budget, scheduling repair appointments, managing utilities, stuff I never even thought about because you handled it all invisibly, and I realized I'm not independent at all. I'm just a dependent person who was ungrateful to the person supporting me. Kieran, no, let me finish. I called you boring and said you had zero ambition, but you built a career that provided security for our family. You raised me alone after Mom died. You've been paying for my life while I criticized yours. That's not boring, that's heroic, and I've been too selfish and immature to see it." The conversation was heading toward territory we'd never explored. Genuine accountability without defensiveness. Real recognition of the sacrifices I'd made without being asked to minimize my own needs. "I appreciate you saying that, Kieran," I said carefully. "But recognition of the problem is just the first step. The question is, what you plan to do differently moving forward." "I've been thinking about that too." His voice carried a seriousness I hadn't heard since he was in high school, working on college applications with genuine focus. "I applied for 3 jobs this week. Real jobs, not just things that sounded interesting. A customer service position at First National Bank, an administrative role at Denver Health Medical Center, and a junior marketing position at a local firm." The specificity surprised me. These weren't the vague, exploring opportunities conversations we'd had before. These were concrete actions with defined outcomes. I also called Colorado State about taking some additional courses in business administration. Not because I necessarily want an MBA, but because I realized I don't have basic skills in budgeting, project management, or professional communication. I found myself genuinely impressed by the practical thinking behind these decisions. This wasn't Kieran pursuing another creative exploration. This was someone who'd identified skill gaps and was taking steps to address them. Those are positive steps, I said. But Kieran, I need you to understand something. I'm not coming back to resume our old arrangement. Silence on the other end of the line. I've accepted a job offer in Arizona. I'll be relocating within the month. Dad, no, please don't leave permanently because of something stupid I said when I was angry. This isn't punishment, Kieran. This is me finally making decisions about my own life instead of organizing everything around enabling your comfort. I kept my voice gentle but firm. You said you wanted independence. Real independence means managing your own housing, income, and responsibilities. But I'm not ready for that level of independence yet. I know that now. Then you'll need to get ready quickly, or find a different living situation that provides the support you need while you develop those skills. The conversation had reached the point where empathy and accountability had to coexist, where I could acknowledge his growth while maintaining the boundaries that made growth possible. What about the house? He asked quietly. The house will go on the market next month. You have until then to figure out your own arrangements. I paused, considering how much detail to share. I'll help you understand the process of finding an apartment, co-signing a lease if your job history supports it, and managing basic life skills. But I won't continue subsidizing a lifestyle that was preventing both of us from moving forward. I understand. His voice was thick with emotion, but not the angry emotion of our birthday confrontation. This sounded like genuine regret mixed with determination. Dad, I know I don't deserve this question, but is there any way we can rebuild our relationship, not the old enabling dynamic, but something healthier? The question I'd been hoping for and dreading in equal measure, because the honest answer was complicated. I loved my son, but I'd lost respect for who he'd become under my enabling. Could respect be rebuilt? Could trust be reestablished? Could we find a way to be family without falling back into destructive patterns? I'd like that, I said finally. But it would have to be a completely different relationship than what we had before. 3 months later, I sat on the patio of my Tucson apartment, watching the sunset paint the Catalina Mountains in shades of gold and purple. The Arizona heat was dry and clean, so different from Denver's unpredictable weather. My phone buzzed with a text from Kieran, the third one this week, which had become our new normal. Dad, got promoted to senior customer service rep at the bank, also finished my first business administration course with a B+. The apartment is small, but I'm managing the budget well. How's the new job? The transformation had been remarkable to witness from a distance. Within 2 weeks of our late-night furnace conversation, Kieran had secured the bank position and moved into a studio apartment in Capitol Hill. The monthly $1,200 I'd been transferring to his account had stopped, but he'd managed to cover his rent, utilities, and groceries without asking for financial help. More importantly, he'd stopped asking for emotional rescue when faced with challenges. The apartment search, job interviews, and course registration, he'd handled all of it independently, calling me only for advice rather than expecting me to solve problems for him. I typed back, "Congratulations on the promotion. The consulting work is challenging and rewarding. Proud of how you've handled the transition." My work with Marcus's firm had exceeded expectations. Traveling to different construction sites, evaluating complex insurance claims, and training local adjusters provided the professional variety I'd never allowed myself to pursue during Kieran's dependent years. Last week, I'd been offered a permanent position with expanded responsibilities and a significant salary increase. The doorbell rang, interrupting my evening reflection. Elena stood on my doorstep with a bottle of wine and a knowing smile. "Thought you might want some company to celebrate your 3-month Arizona anniversary," she said, settling into the patio chair across from me. "It doesn't feel like 3 months," I admitted, opening the wine. "More like 3 years of personal growth compressed into a season." "And Kieran, how's he adjusting to actual independence?" "Better than I expected, better than he expected too, I think." I poured wine for both of us. "He's discovered that he's more capable than either of us realized when he was comfortable being dependent." Elena raised her glass. "To late-blooming maturity and parents who finally stop enabling it." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the desert landscape shift from gold to purple to deep blue as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The peace I'd found in that hotel room 6 months ago had evolved into something deeper, not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of genuine contentment. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Kieran. Dad, I've been thinking about Mom's birthday next month. Would it be okay if I flew to Arizona? I'd like to visit her favorite desert botanical garden with you. I'll pay for my own ticket. The invitation was different from anything he'd suggested before, not asking me to accommodate his schedule or preferences, but offering to invest his own resources in rebuilding our relationship. I typed back, I'd like that very much. The sunset was complete now, and the first stars were appearing in Arizona's remarkably clear sky. Tomorrow I'd wake up and make decisions based on my own interests and values, rather than managing someone else's life choices. The freedom was still remarkable after all these months. Kieran had gotten what he'd claimed to want, a father who disappeared from his daily life. But instead of the liberation he'd expected, he'd discovered the weight of genuine independence. And somehow, in learning to carry that weight himself, he'd found his way back to respecting the man who'd been carrying it for both of them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of what they think they want. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Click the box on the left for our next inspiring story. Thank you for watching.